It was scary.
So let's go ahead and move on to the vestibulo-cerebellar pathways. I like to start with vestibulo-cerebellar because it's easy. It's the easiest one of all of them. Okay? It's just a feedback loop that has to do with your vestibular system. Let's look at doing some labeling here. So what this is a straight frontal section. Okay, this is just a frontal section. So this is your cortex up here, cortical region. Okay, what are these guys? Thalamus. Okay, it's a thalamus. Okay. And over here, this is your superior cerebellar peduncle. Okay, here's your middle cerebellar peduncle. And here's your inferior. Like I said, these are just conduits connecting the brainstem with the cerebellar region. Okay, so this is brainstem, midbrain, pons, medulla. Here's your cerebellum. Okay, and this is going to be your vestibular cerebellar, vestibulo-cerebellar. So what region, what functional region of the brain is cerebellum is that going to be? Remember, what's the one that has to do with balance? The flocculonodular. That's your flocculonodular lobe. That's your vestibulo-cerebellum. And I'm going to go ahead and draw. So remember, if behind the brainstem, and I'm drawing it out here so you can see it, there's going to be your flocculonodular lobe, your vestibulo-cerebellum. That resides here. So I'm just drawing that in. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and label mostly on this side, just the basic parts. I'll label the players on that side because we're just going to draw it on one side for the sake of space. So this red indicates that functional region and also gross anatomical region of the cerebellum. It's called your flocculonodular lobe. Something different. Okay, now, associated, like I said previously, this has to do with your inner ear or your vestibular system. So you should know that on the outside here, you have your ears. That's just an ear bilaterally. Okay, and in your inner ear, you actually have your vestibular system. And for right now, I'll just represent it as something like that. Just 3 different canals. Okay, so this is your vestibular system. Okay. And your vestibular system is responsible for detecting head movement, knowing where your head is in 3-dimensional space. It's connected up to the 8th cranial nerve, and it actually sends down information to this thing we've talked about previously. This is your vestibular nucleus. Okay, so like I said, the vestibular system has associated with it an 8th cranial nerve, and then I'm just going to represent that connection to the vestibular nucleus via the 8th cranial nerve. We'll talk more about that later on, but just know that your vestibular system connects to your vestibular nucleus. When we talked about the vestibular nucleus previously, what tract does that? Did you have a question, Morgan?
Yeah.
nucleus. System. Vestibular system. Yeah, that's just my crude representation of vestibular system. We'll draw it later. But you should know that this information, your vestibular system, resides in your inner ear. And I've just drawn 2 ears crudely and 3 semicircular canals. We'll talk about that later. That's hooked up to your 8th cranial nerve. So this is how this vestibular nucleus receives that information. It's going to receive that information bilaterally. We'll talk more about that later, but that's how the vestibular system gets the information to convey it to your flocculonodular lobe. Now coming out of the vestibular nucleus, coming straight on down, does anybody remember the name of that tract? This is your vestibulospinal tract. And your vestibulospinal tract, I hope everybody remembers, is associated with extensor musculature, especially postural extensors. So when you're upright against gravity, you want those to fire. Okay, any other questions? I'm just trying to set up all the basic players. So we've got your flocculonodular lobe. Important player here is going to be your vestibular nucleus. Does anyone remember which nucleus, which deep cerebellar nucleus the flocculonodular lobe or the vestibular cerebellum was associated with? That's going to be your vestigial. I'm just going to draw, for right now I'm going to draw the pathway on this side. So up here, you have a vestigial nucleus. F-A-S-T-I-G-I-A-L. That's your vestigial nucleus. And that's just one of the deep cerebellar nuclei. It's a deep cerebellar nucleus. Okay, it's going to be specifically associated with any information coming to the flocculonodular lobe or the vermis. We'll get to the vermis here in a minute. One more player we have to draw in here, and that's going to be every specific area, like the flocculonodular lobe, is lined with these intermittent cells. It has its very own Purkinje cell associated with it. So here's my Purkinje cell. Purkinje cells in here, and like I said, it's just hooked up with its own deep cerebellar nucleus. So flocculonodular lobe hooked up with the vestigial nucleus. All those Purkinje cells in that flocculonodular lobe are hooked right up already with the vestigial nucleus. Questions? Okay, those are all the players in this pathway. So what happens is that the vestibular nucleus sends out fibers. These are afferent fibers or mossy fibers that come in through the inferior cerebellar peduncle and connect with their Purkinje cell. Okay, information relayed through the vestibular nucleus is coming from the vestibular system in your inner ear. Okay, vestibular system in your ear detects head motion or upright against gravity, conveys that information to the vestibular nucleus. Vestibular nucleus sends out fibers that connect to the Purkinje cell. It's associated with the balance region of the cerebellum. Purkinje cell is already hooked up to the vestigial nucleus. It in turn sends out a fiber from the vestigial nucleus, comes out and comes again through the inferior cerebellar peduncle to make another connection. It's kind of like a feedback loop with the vestibular nucleus. So this is just a simple feedback loop. Vestibular system detects a change, conveys that information to the nucleus. Nucleus sends out fibers attached to the Purkinje cell. Purkinje cell is already hooked up to the vestigial nucleus, and that sends the information back to the vestibular nucleus. That shows how important it is for your brain to know where your head is in three-dimensional space. If there's something wrong with your vestibular system, that information isn't getting through. Okay, unless you ever had BPPV? Whoops, sorry. It's a common vestibular problem. Okay, the way I said, you've had BPPV. Okay, so essentially, if you've had a concussion, sometimes it can come on with a concussion. Sometimes it comes on for no reason at all. What happens is you have little rocks known as otoconia in your inner ear and your vestibular apparatus, and sometimes they just get knocked loose and get caught into the wrong part, and you have severe vertigo, severe rotational vertigo. Okay, Tyler?
I busted my eardrum in the water.
That's a little different. This is a vestibular problem, so I'm just trying to convey the importance that you need your vestibular system to be working, and it's that important where it conveys everything to your cerebellum. Okay? Just a basic feedback loop. All players are involved. Vestibular nucleus sends out to the Purkinje cell in the flocculonodular area, hooked up to your vestibular nucleus, comes back out, relays that information to the vestibular nucleus, promotes upright against gravity if you're standing upright. Questions? Catherine, did you have a question? I can help.
I'm just trying to trace it out.
Okay. Yeah.
The direction.
Yes. So there is really no direction. So it's kind of like information coming in from your ear is being received here at your vestibular nucleus. Axons coming out here. So this is afferent information coming in to the flocculonodular area, and it synapses with your Purkinje cell. Okay, your Purkinje cell is already hooked up to your vestigial nucleus, and then your vestigial nucleus then sends out efferent information back to the vestibular nucleus. Let me label that's a Purkinje cell. This guy here is your Purkinje cell. Okay, other questions? Okay, so that one first. I'll be back. Yes.
Once the vestibular nucleus sends the information to the vestibular,
Yes.
then it goes down the vestibular spinal tract and carries out that.
Yes. You are upright and correct. That's how that happens. So that information is conveyed from your vestibular system, and then that information is conveyed to the cerebellum, so the cerebellum knows where you are, because that's important for motor planning and movement. Okay, but that information comes back down. Other questions, Trinity?
So that whole system is what you were calling the feedback loop, or just okay.
Yep, that whole system. The feedback loop is pairing up the vestibular nucleus with the Purkinje cell to the vestigial nucleus, and then right back to the, it's like a circle. It's a circle input system. Other questions? Like I said, I think this is the easiest one to see. There's not very many players involved here. But overall, like I tried to show before, there's always going to be a deep cerebellar nucleus associated with a particular functional region. There's always going to be a Purkinje cell associated with that functional region. And then the pathways, the afferent information coming in is going to vary a little bit, and then the efferent is going to vary a little bit. And this is just a basic feedback loop. This happens without thought. Notice that none of this information goes up to the cortical region. Right? So this is automatic. You don't have to think about it. You can't think about it. It's not possible. Right? This is all controlled down here at the level of the cerebellum. Any other questions about that? Good. All right, let's move on to, so let's look at of the two pathways, the dorsal or posterior spinocerebellar pathway, I think is a little bit easier than the ventral. Let's find this thing today. I was going to be twisted. Okay, so think intermediate difficulty here. Again, you know, we're starting at the frontal cross section here, and here I have a transverse section of my spinal cord. Okay, hopefully you guys are used to seeing that. And we're going to start the spinal cord and go up. But first I got to draw the important players and label things. So here's my thalamus. Thalamus is going to be important in this one. Okay. And again, superior, middle, and inferior. And these are all cerebellar peduncles. Okay. Another one that's going to be important here. Up here, it's going to be your motor planning area. So this is going to be your primary motor or premotor cortex and your supplementary motor area. Okay, and then thinking about this, I had done, I think this is consistent. I think it was green in the middle. So in thinking about this pathway, the spinocerebellar pathways, this is going to be the spinocerebellum. So I have to be involved here in the spinocerebellum for trunk is the vermal area. Okay, so here's the vermal area. That's the vermis. Okay, and also I have to think about the paravermal area. Okay, what deep cerebellar nucleus is associated with the vermal area? Does anybody remember? It's the same as the vestibulocerebellum, I'll tell you that. Fastigial. Here's your fastigial nucleus. And I had another deep cerebellar nucleus that was associated with the paravermal region. You remember that one? It's your interposed. Okay, I realize I'm only looking at one side, so this would be duplicated on the opposite side. So that this, associated with this paravermal region, the deep cerebellar nucleus is going to be my interposed nucleus. Do this. It's going to be, let's do, and associated with each region itself is going to be a Purkinje cell. So down here, let's say for this vermal region here, here's the Purkinje cell associated with the vermal region, and that's going to be hooked all the way up to the fastigial nucleus, right? And then hooked up with my interposed nucleus, I'm going to have another Purkinje cell for that particular functional region. And that's going to be hooked up to my interposed nucleus. And here's an old favorite from way back when. We have a nuclei that's a really good landmark for the midbrain, part of the descending motor tracts. Anybody remember this one? Yep, that's the red nucleus. Okay, what we know about the red nucleus is it immediately decussates in the midbrain and then comes on down. All right, let's leave that there. And then, yeah. Okay, that's going to be one of the players. It's going to be the red nucleus. And then we also have this diffuse collection of neuronal cell bodies here in the medulla that we talked about previously as being responsible for awakeness or awareness. And that has its own spine chart. That's the reticular formation. Reticular formation. Remember that reticular formation is going to be associated with extension. Think postural extension. And then up here in the thalamus, we're going to have just any old nucleus. It doesn't have a name like BPL did for DCML and STT. Just any old nucleus in the thalamus, and let's just label that as a thalamic nucleus. thalamic nucleus. Read that, Hannah? Is it clear? Okay. So I'm just like I did before, I'm just labeling all the important players that we're going to connect together here in a minute. All right, now, in looking down here, you see it, and the spinal cord, if I had to label in, bless you, this is going to be my dorsal spinal cerebellar tract. Okay, so if you remember, that's going to be right here. It's part of the lateral column. It's one on both sides. It's dorsal because it's more dorsal. Let's call that the dorsal spinocerebellar tract. Okay. Then we have our old friend, pseudounipolar cell body sitting here in the dorsal root ganglia, coming out and picking up information. So this is going to be information. This is going to be both for trunk and extremity. So this is generic for non-conscious proprioception for both trunk and extremities. So this is all non-conscious proprioception coming in. So do I see that? So that's non-conscious proprioception for trunk and extremities. So here's my neuronal cell body, pseudounipolar neuronal cell body sitting there in the dorsal root ganglia. And dendrites are going to pick up information for all non-conscious proprioception throughout the body, whether it's trunk or extremity. Let's think about how to do this. Okay, so here's my first order neuron is coming in here, and I'm going to synapse in the dorsal great horn, and I'm going to synapse on a specific nucleus. This specific nucleus is called Clark's nucleus. You see, yeah, draw it in there. So here's my nucleus, and I'm synapsing in. Okay, for the dorsal, I synapse on Clark's nucleus. C-L-A-R-K-E'(S), nucleus. That's Clark's nucleus. Okay. Then once I synapse on Clark's nucleus, this immediately travels up the same side. Okay, for cerebellum, it's always going to be same side. So you're on the same side. You come up the dorsal spinal cerebellar tract, and you're going to come in. Okay, you're going to have any information that's coming from the trunk is going to go through the inferior cerebellar peduncle and link up or synapse with the Purkinje cell in the vermal area. And any information that's coming from the extremities is going to come up and synapse with the Purkinje cell that's in the paravermal area. Does that make sense? You said trunk is in the verbal area. Okay, let me write that down. So the vermis is trunk, and the paravermis is extremity. So when it travels up the spinal cord, there's no differentiation between trunk and extremity. It's just traveling up the spinal cord. It's part of the system. And it's traveling up through that dorsal spinal cerebellar tract. So axon comes in, synapses with Clark's nucleus, immediately starts to travel up the dorsal spinal cerebellar tract ipsilaterally, enters afferent fibers, enter in through the inferior cerebellar peduncle, synapse with Purkinje cells in both the vermis and the paravermis. Questions? Okay, so let's look at the trunk first. Thinking about efferent information coming out of the vermal area about trunk is going to the vestigial nucleus, sends out an axon, comes through the superior cerebellar peduncle, and then synapses here with your reticular formation, promoting trunk extension. Okay, so trunk musculature. The vestigial nucleus is hooked up with the reticular formation. Okay, so as far as the paravermal area, the interposed nucleus here sends out two different axons. The first axon is going to come through and go out the superior cerebellar peduncle synapse with the red nucleus. Okay, the red nucleus, in addition to being associated with upper extremity flexion, it's also involved, nobody really knows how, but it's going to stimulate muscle tone. Write that in since that's new. Muscle tone. Remember how I was trying to point out that that woman looked a little hypotonic to me? She didn't have a lot of muscle tone. There's a problem with her cerebellar region. So decreased muscle tone is associated with cerebellar issues, and that's how that happens, through the red nucleus. In addition to the connection with the red nucleus, so notice that you synapse with the red nucleus, that immediately decussates, so you're still same side. You also send out axons that go out through the superior cerebellar peduncle and synapse with the contralateral thalamic nucleus. Okay, so that means information about where your extremities are in three-dimensional space is being transmitted to that particular thalamic nucleus, and then that thalamic nucleus then sends out information to the premotor cortex or the supplementary motor area about where your extremities are in three-dimensional space. So for example, it's a very different motion if I'm starting here with my hand in my pocket and I go to reach for my coffee cup or water cup. Let's take a drink of water. In order for that to happen, the premotor cortex supplementary motor area needs to know where my hand started. If I started in my pocket, that's going to be very different than if I started on my head. Right? So the sequence of movements that I have to do now are to come down, whereas before I'm here and I have to come up. So before I ever move, I know exactly where my hands are in three-dimensional space. I don't have to look. I know where I'm starting. That's why that's important. Does that make sense? It's kind of like, it's the same thing if you were asked to close your eyes and then touch your nose, right? Everybody could do that. But if I walked up to Alyssa and I said, okay, close your eyes, touch my nose, see? She can't do it. She doesn't know where my nose is. Her hands don't know, but your body knows. I mean, that's how you know that. Okay, that's how you can do that information. Questions about that? Okay, and that's it. That's the dorsal spinal cerebellar pathway. Lots of information coming in here. So you have your sensory neuron, pseudounipolar neuron, comes in, synapses with Clark's nucleus. Stays ipsilateral, goes up the dorsal spinal cerebellar tract. Information from trunk is coming to the vernus. Information from extremities is coming into the paravermal region. Trunk is going out through the vestigial nucleus to the reticular spinal tract. Yeah, reticular formation stimulates extension. And then interposed nucleus is going both to the red nucleus, involved in muscle tone, as well as the thalamic nucleus, conveying information up to the premotor cortex. Got it? Okay, that's the easy one. Let's go back and look at ventral. So, The good thing about the ventral spinal cerebellar tract is that the players are all exactly the same. So if you just want to go ahead and label everything that was there before, so in other words, I have the same thalamic nucleus. I have information that's going to be conveyed up here to the premotor cortex and the supplementary motor area. I have my red nucleus sitting here in the midbrain. It's going to decussate immediately and come down. Makes the cerebrospinal tract. I have my reticular formation. The reticulospinal tract. I have my, I think it's blue. I have my vermal region. I can create my vermal region. And I know that hooked up with my vermal region, the nucleus that I'm going to use is my vestigial nucleus. Information about trunk. And I know that in my paravermal region, I think I got the color back on this kid. In my paravermal region, it's going to be here. What's the nucleus in the paravermal region? Does anybody remember? Interposed. Good. So here's your interposed nucleus in the paradermal region. Okay, same player. So here's superior, middle, inferior cerebellum peduncle. I think that's everybody. And then I have to have here's my Purkinje cell. Again, all the players are identical. So my Purkinje cell is here in the vermal region associated with my vestigial nucleus. This is my Purkinje. And then associated with my interposed nucleus, I also have Purkinje cells that are lining the paravermal area, connected up here. I think those are the important players that we have to worry about. So we got that? Okay. And then moving forward, I want to look at the spinal cord cross-section, the transverse section that we have here. And I want to draw in my ventral spinal cerebellar tracts. So my dorsal is going to be up here, so my ventral is going to be right here. It's part of the lateral column. Okay, and that's my, it's a ventral spinocerebellar tract. Okay, pretty good. And like I had before, here's my pseudo-unipolar neuronal cell body coming out here, living in the dorsal root ganglia, and it's going to pick up information from its non-conscious proprioception from trunk and extremities. Same information is being carried in the ventral extremities. Same information is carried in the ventral spinocerebellar pathway as it is in the dorsal spinocerebellar pathway. Absolutely no difference. Everybody caught up? So what I have here in the dorsal great horn is neuronal cell body. It is not Clark's nucleus. It's an unknown nucleus. It's just an unknown nucleus, lives in the dorsal root ganglia, involved conveying sensory information. But what happened, everybody else that we looked at was ipsilateral. For some reason, the ventral spinocerebellar pathway decides to come in and cross over immediately to the opposite side. So it decussates to the opposite side. And it travels up the ventral spinocerebellar pathway, all the way up the spinal cord, through the brainstem, comes in the superior cerebellar peduncle on the other side, okay, so axons are traveling up through the inferior cerebellar peduncle, or the superior cerebellar peduncle that is contralateral to where the information came from, and then that information, that axon, kind of sneaks its way back behind the brainstem, okay, and synapses with the Purkinje cell associated with the vermis, and also the Purkinje cell associated with the paravermis.
So it decussates, but it's,
Yeah, it decussates immediately, and then it goes up, it comes into superior, so it's completely backwards. So it shouldn't come, it doesn't come into the inferior, it comes into superior, and then it snakes its way around behind the brainstem to come back. Yeah, I know, it's really irritating. You know, I've had people ask me before, why does it do that? It's like, I don't know. But the other thing I can come up with is, in case there's a problem with this, with the dorsal tract or this tract on this side, that information is so important to know where your body is in three-dimensional space that it comes up the other side too. It's kind of like it's a backup system. It's a redundant system. That's the only thing I can come up with. I have no idea why it does that. It just is very sneaky. Goes contralateral, then comes back to ipsilateral. So all the information coming into the cerebellum is all ipsilateral. Yes? Welcome.
So, would the symptoms be ipsilateral? It just ipsilateral?
Yeah, so the symptoms are ipsilateral because the information, so it's processed ipsilaterally to where the information was received.
So,
It's probably some evolutionary thing. Why that happens, I don't know. Derek?
So are the Clark's nucleus and the unknown named nucleus, are they both second-order neurons then?
Now, I wouldn't consider it second-order neurons or anything like that. That's more for the somatosensory systems. This is not at the level. This is information going into the cerebellum.
Okay.
They're just yeah, I might have said second-order nucleus. It's not, don't think about it that way, okay? Other questions about this? Okay, and it's got to be something evolutionarily, and you know, it's probably just really important to know where your body parts are in three-dimensional space for lots of different reasons. So, but once the cool thing is, once it does all its crossing back and forth, it comes here, and all the other connections are exactly the same as the dorsal spinocerebellar tract. So, what happens is the information coming from the fastigial nucleus here in the vermal area, that efferent information is now flowing out to the superior cerebellar peduncle, hooking up with your reticular formation, just like before, and information coming from the interposed nucleus, again, goes to two places. It goes and hooks up with the red nucleus, synapses with the red, and it also comes up here and synapses with the contralateral thalamus, which then conveys information to the premotor cortex and supplementary motor cortex, the contralateral. See that okay? That's the whole thing. More complicated than it needs to be. Make it look harder than it is, right? It's all the same information, but it just does a double cross. The ventral's naughty. Question, Caitlin? No? Yeah, so the blue is going to the red nucleus and also the thalamic nucleus. Two different things. Here. Yes, any information leaving the nuclei, the deep cerebellar nuclei, those are that's efferent information. Any information coming in to the cerebellum, all these other fibers, they're mossy fibers, and that's afferent information. Those are all the mossy fibers that we talked about before. There's still one more that we have to cover, but we're almost there. Like I said, some people get confused with the cerebellar stuff, but I think if you just go over and think about it, everything remains ipsilateral. The ventral is just a little bit more tricky than the dorsal, for whatever reason. And the last pathway is going to be your cerebrocerebellar pathway. And this one we talked about. I have that one. So this is one we talked about before that was thinking about moving. Okay, same cross section, Same thing that I've done before, no difference. Here's my thalamus. Okay. And what I'm going to do, so this one's going to be important. This is the only one, and it's the biggest conduit is your middle cerebellar peduncle. So this is the one that uses the middle cerebellar peduncle. And you can see why that conduit is so big, because thinking about moving is something that we do all the time. This has got a lot of axons going through that middle cerebellar peduncle. So we have up here, again, there's going to be a nucleus that's in the thalamus. It's going to be an important player. I'll label that. Thalamic nucleus. And then up here, when you're thinking about moving, you're thinking about your premotor cortex or your supplementary motor area. Okay. And then before you move, you need some input from your cerebellum, and that's what this pathway is all about. Does anybody remember which functional region of the cerebellum was involved in the cerebellar pathway? Yeah, lateral hemispheres, good. So here's your lateral hemispheres. And then it's actually my favorite nucleus. It's the dentate nucleus. Looks like teeth. Here's your dentate nucleus. And lined up with your dentate nucleus, there's Purkinje cells that are specific for the lateral hemispheres, or your cerebrocerebellum. So here's my Purkinje cell. And those are already pre-hooked up to my dentate nucleus. I'm going to label that. So Purkinje, see that? Purkinje cell. And then here's my dentate nucleus. Okay, this one's a lot easier than the ventral. And we also have, how do I do this color? One more important player, and we haven't talked about these yet at all. I think we're going to make them blue this year. So there are going to be some specific nuclei here that are involved in receiving that information on the same side as the cortical region. And these are called pontine nuclei. Those are your pontine nuclei. Okay, so thinking about moving, premotor cortex, supplementary motor area, I'm thinking about moving, so I have to consult with the cerebellum. So I send out some axons here that come all the way down through the brainstem, and they're going to hook up with the pontine nucleus. Okay. Thinking about moving. Okay, now, those pontine nuclei, the pontine nucleus then sends out an axon that goes through the middle cerebellar peduncle and hooks up with the dentate nucleus. Oh, I'm sorry, that's not right. It hooks up with the Purkinje cell. My bad. You always hook up, all the afferent information is going to hook up with your Purkinje cell first. And then your Purkinje cell's already hooked up with your dentate nucleus, and your dentate nucleus sends out an axon that goes out the superior cerebellar peduncle and hooks up with your thalamic nucleus. And then your thalamic nucleus sends out an axon that comes back and relays information to the premotor cortex or supplementary motor area about everything that your body knows. Questions? Yes?
What was the question mark for?
thinking about moving. Yeah, thinking about moving, that's all. I'm thinking about moving. I need a lot of information before I can actually move. I need to consult with cerebellum. I need information from my cerebellum to make sure everything's okay. Because remember, all the information about where my extremities are in three-dimensional space has already come up there. But it's part of the motor planning piece. Okay, thinking about moving. The only thing, so this should just come right down to Purkinje cell. We don't go to the dentate nucleus. I'll have to shade that out. Hopefully, you caught that in time. Question, Jared?
How are they able to trace these pathways?
Actually, it's really, well, there's all kinds of things they can do, but right now there's something called, the movement. I can't think of the name of it, but they actually do fMRIs and looking at all the pathways, all the axons that travel together. They're really cool pictures. I can't think of it. There's a project we started in 2016, I guess. I can't think of the name of it. But they looked at all the axons that are traveling together in three-dimensional space. And it's really the axons that are more important than the neuronal cell bodies. I mean, the neuronal cell bodies can be destroyed, but the axon transport is really cool. And I can't think of the name. I'll have to look it up now. I'll have to remember it for next time. Any other questions? That's it. You made it through. That's a lot. A lot of new words, right? A lot of new words for today. The cerebrocerebellar pathway, but hopefully you can see that everything, so the information might be processed contralaterally, but all the information essentially stays ipsilateral with respect to the cerebellum. Okay, that's the big difference. Cortical being contralateral, cerebellar being ipsilateral. I can't think of that. Okay, we're done.